Well, welcome back to the online session of the Oxford Real Farming Conference 2023. My name is Anita McNaught. I'm talking to you from the rather gloomy surroundings of some kind of courtroom in the bowels of the Oxford Town Hall. You'll have to forgive the dark wood panelling, which does certainly not represent the mood out there in the Oxford Town Hall as a whole, which has been absolutely joyous as we have wrapped up 2 days of extraordinary discussion, debate, connection, the sharing of ideas, as indeed has been the case for 3 days online across the world. We had 1,800 delegates here at the conference in Oxford. We've had 2,700 people join the Oxford Real Farming Conference 2023 from around the world. Apparently, we are now the largest agroecological gathering in one place that has ever been held, which is a record that we can only hope to exceed next year. What we're doing as we wrap up our day's events is go back to talk to some of the key participants in this process for all of us over the last few days, and ask them why this conference has mattered to them, what particular milestones we think it has marked for you, for your particular areas of expertise and interest, the areas you're campaigning in, what your fears and hopes for the future are, and perhaps what tools this conference might have given you to move forward. Let's go first of all to India, to Swati Renduchintala, who's there with us, and to Dee Woods, who's in Jamaica listening in. We'll be talking for 5 minutes to each of you. Swati, we've had a chance to talk before. Let's pretend we didn't have that conversation. And let's once again talk about how these 3 days have gone for you, why they've mattered, what you've taken from it.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Anita, for that. I'm speaking, it's 10:30 here, so it's quite late for us, but we are just, the world is awakening to agroecology. So let's celebrate that. So the last 3 days, I've had the utmost honor of representing the voices of farmers in Andhra Pradesh who are transitioning from chemical paradigm of agriculture to agroecology and natural farming. So I got the opportunity to speak in 2 events. The first event, the opening session, which was organized by Global Women's Strike, where the event on a care income to protect the land, the people, and the natural world. And yesterday I spoke with AFSA. The brilliant work that is happening in Africa is Andhra Pradesh to Africa, taking agroecology to scale through to farmer knowledge exchange. So both, I want to combine our learning from both these sessions. Is the positive takeaways is that it has been an honor of bringing the entire world at the doorstep of the farmers of Andhra Pradesh. How would it be possible that people across the globe has been actually keenly listening? There have been footprints of 5,000 people listening to the farmers of the work that is happening in online, the work happening in Andhra Pradesh of the farmers who are transitioning. And these are farmers who nobody cares majorly. You know, they're ignored. The earnings, many of them have earning of US dollars a year or less in many cases, and the world is knocking at the doors, and this ORFC has given that platform to ensure that they matter. And the world saw the case study of Anusuya Amma. She is a champion farmer who is transitioning farmers on the field, and they heard her, they listened to her in spite of the language difference, and the interpretation was facilitated. The beauty of it was excellent. We broke the wall that we know everything, rather than that, the humility that we want to learn from the farmers who are battling themselves on the field. So this is the first positive takeaway. It's inspiring. Second has been the right knowledge. We are living in the age of abundance of knowledge. We are living in a world of social media, unlimited access to internet, but we do not still have the right knowledge of how agroecology works. And majorly, how it works is fine. How do we take it to the people? How do we make agroecology viral in the sense? How do we really take it to millions of farmers? How do we bring it to every doorstep of farmers is critical. And the conversation has ignited, and it's very heartening that we are just not restricted to the whys of agroecology. Rather, we are talking about how to take it to everybody. So that is a positive breakthrough. And the third has been that the shattering of individual silos, that what we are doing is the only right way. This conference has broken in the last 3 days. I've seen people acknowledge, humbling themselves down and saying that no, our way is not one of the ways, but that the same thing can be achieved by 1,000 other ways and means, and every means matter. We have 1,000 flowers or 1,000,000 flowers have to bloom to bring this transition, to break the shackles of green revolution paradigm. While the positives exist, I think we all are pondering this question of the key challenge of, we are a conglomeration of like-minded people. We want to be useful. We want to help the planet and the farm and the livelihood. But this like-mindedness, how does it go beyond this group of people of 5,000, 10,000 like-minded individuals across the group? And it goes to people who can make that difference at the political level, at the grassroots levels, at the mid-level leadership levels, at the donor level, philanthropies, everything. So how do we take this beyond this 10,000 people, like-minded people, is a key challenge. Thank you so much for listening to me. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Swati. Dee, in Jamaica. And you,
I'm in Trinidad, actually. I'm in Trinidad and Tobago.
You're in Trinidad. I'm so sorry. I had my notes.
Yeah, someone got it.
Oh my word. Give my love to Trinidad. I spent a year there as a child.
Okay.
It was amazing, transformative. Anyway,
Brilliant.
We digress.
Yeah.
Tell me now how you feel the ORFC has evolved, because it is a vastly different proposition this year than it was BC, before COVID.
Yeah, before COVID. And I would say, probably 4 or 5 years ago, it was still a conference for what people perceive as a farmer in England, the old white man on his tractor with his dog. And based on the efforts of myself and several other people, including Lion Land in Our Names, Land Workers Alliance, where I'm a director, and Food Justice Policy Coordinator. We've worked hard to make this a truly inclusive and international space, to amplify and make visible voices and struggles of farmers, land workers, fisher folk, food workers, civil society, women, diverse genders, people with disabilities, activists, radical philanthropists, racialized and minoritized people, global majority queer people. And we're here to share, to connect, to network. And we really have become the largest farming conference in the world, with so many amazing people and sessions. And we've moved on from just being, rigid and on farming practice and being, I'm sorry, but quite dry and crumbly, to actually getting at the roots of our food system and what needs to change. So we've have themes of rights and justice and equity, along with all the paradigm shifting, regenerative agriculture, agroecology, regenerative economies even. Swati and I were in a session, it was 4:30 a.m. for me, mind you, on, a care income for people and planet. All right. And then I was in another session on intersectionality as a tool for analysis and practice in redressing the inequalities that everyone in our food system faces. And, we've been looking at land justice and abolition, healing grounds, diversity. Agroecology is about diversity. And we spoke about narratives and stories and power of our personal and collective and ancestral and indigenous stories to reclaim our power and agency, to dismantle all these false narratives of corporations and philanthrocapitalists. And reparations, reparative justice, holistic repair and healing, the redistribution of wealth, the recognition of our diverse knowledges, and of peoples and differences. And in the last session that I went to, Loriem sang about grief and freedom. And in that session, which was called Seed and Reparations, they also spoke about Sankofa. And Sankofa is a Ghanaian belief in about going back to fetch what was good and learn it from the past and bringing it to the present. And most people associate that with an Adinkra symbol of a bird facing backwards. But there's another symbol. That is our hearts. And, as we build solidarity, as we build this internationalist solidarity and collective action for justice, equity, and collective liberation in our food systems, we need to let it come from fire in our hearts. We need that revolutionary love. All right, because this is a movement that comes from grassroots and from the ground.
Dee, thank you. Dee in Trinidad, not Jamaica. My apologies for that. Believe me, if I'd known, I would never have made that mistake. Absolutely, and thank you also for your contribution to the in-person conference too. La Via Campesina, the vital, long-standing, eminent, really, organization now. We have two people speaking from two parts of the planet on that. First of all, Morgan Oddy in France. Morgan, you were juggling this conference between your own farming necessities. You had to be there to get the farming bits done in between getting the conference participation done, so vital for, as Dee said, your heart and the coming revolution. Did you manage to fit in enough? Was it frustrating? Did you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to hear some of the sessions, participate in the ones you thought were vital?
No, I was lucky enough that I could do both. I could participate to sessions, and in between sessions, I could go and harvest my vegetables or cut some wood. And so well, I didn't have the chance to have the presential. I'm sure it's great to be there in Oxford. I had the chance to be there a few years ago, and I think I remember the room where you actually stand. But well, at least being following the online Oxford Real Farming Conference was also great, and I could do my farming in between. So, well, I also share with other speakers the fact that thanks to COVID, we now have an hybrid session and a much more internationalist conference, which is great because we do really need spaces where we can exchange with each other from different parts of the world, because the world has become so fragmented that we really do need spaces with interpretation, because not everybody speaks English, where we can understand each other, listen to each other, and discuss with each other the different perspectives. I think that's key, and that ORFC plays a key role in this. And I'm so grateful for the interpreters, because without the interpreters, we wouldn't be able to understand each other. And in La Via Campesina, we often say that without interpretation, there is no revolution. So thanks a lot to all the or the interpreters that were able to make us understand each other. I had really the chance to be part of an amazing discussion, a difficult topic on wars and armed conflict and how farmers deal with this situation. And that was an amazing session to have peasants from Palestine, from Ukraine, and from Congo talking to each other, discussing, and to see how the reality of people and of peasants in a completely different countries, where you could think that it's so different, but in the end, facing the conflict, the farmers continue to produce food, try to make sure that displaced people also have access to food. And that was really interesting to see the connection and to see how it could help people to understand better. I'm really sure that there is no way for just peace in the future without small-scale farmers, without the old projects that we have, which is based on food sovereignty, agroecology, popular feminism, agrarian reform, and peasants' rights. So that's where we are. It's not only a farmers or food producer conference. It's about the future of humanity. I think we should be very much aware that that is the topic of such a conference, not only farming, but really the future of humanity. So really, thanks a lot, and see you next year.
Thank you so much. That sense of this being a crucial moment to seize was also very evident in the in-person conference too. And some quite elderly, dusty men were talking about revolution. So that was quite amusing for me. Things have certainly changed. And who would have thought that COVID would have normalized this sort of contact so effectively that we can now embrace it as an equally valid form of connection? So vital. Tyler, over in the United States, also with Via Campesina, and having to manage another time zone, but meeting people you would never have met any other way.
Yes, thank you, Anita, for facilitating this discussion. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all for the closing plenary. I'm Tyler Short. I'm here in the United States. I'm a small-scale food producer. My organization is called Family Farm Defenders, and we're a member of La Via Campesina. It's really great to be here alongside Morgan and the other speakers to reflect on the conference, which I first participated just attending the conference in 2021. And the lessons that I learned that year really stand with me today. Especially in the United States context, the importance of respecting Indigenous sovereignty, really looking at the rights of Indigenous peoples, and building up relationships, right, between Indigenous communities and descendants of colonists here. So I'm really happy to have chaired one of 6 sessions by Via Campesina in this year's conference. We had a session on youth and transformation of food systems, and it was a really great space for us to connect with each other and really kind of build unity in our diversity. We had youth from 4 different regions of La Via Campesina participating in the session. And so we had someone from the Caribbean, from North America, Europe, and South Asia. The major topics that we discussed were sort of the big problems that youth face in food and agricultural systems, but also more particular problems that we face in our local contexts. For example, the political situation right now in Haiti, and the particular impacts on peasants and workers, as well as the recent climate chaos, the flooding in Pakistan last year, and the impacts on small-scale food producers there. We discussed land access and control, as well as market access, and it's really important, not just for young people, all farmers, all small-scale, medium-scale farmers, that we really raise awareness about the need for parity pricing, in which producers receive a fair wage, a fair price for the products that we supply, most often at the local level. Small-scale food producers are feeding the world, and we have the solutions to cool the planet too. So we really called attention for the need for a just transition away from industrial agriculture toward peasant agroecology, We really looked at the problems presented by digitalization in agriculture, especially the threats of biopiracy, the marketing of data, and other forms of economic enclosure. We discussed public policy approaches for protecting human rights. Via Campesina does a lot of work in the UN Human Rights Council on the Declaration on Peasants' Rights. We also work in the United Nations Committee on World Food Security. As Dee mentioned, the session on intersectionality is a really important topic for Via Campesina right now. And we're experiencing the need to bring intersectional policy approaches in this UN advocacy work. Our session really emphasized the need for food sovereignty, which I'm sure a lot of conference participants are starting to become quite familiar with. But food sovereignty is our alternative to a food security approach to policy. It's our right to define our own food and agricultural systems. But this is necessarily reliant upon the protection of peasants' rights. And so in conclusion, I just wanted to note some of the questions that emerged in our session as we talk about young peasants and peasants' rights. The question often emerges, what do we mean by peasant? This term is generally quite derogatory in global northern countries. And so it's important for us in Via Campesina to really make clear that we are reclaiming the peasant identities with pride. And we say, we feed the world. We are proud to be peasants. We have special connections with the land, and we are stewarding our ecosystems. We also discussed different tensions that young people face in the movement, as well as in policy spaces, as we're building up our leadership skills. And we also addressed some personal questions on why we are farmers. Why are we called to be food producers and to be activists? So it was a really great moment for us as young people to engage in the conference, and it's absolutely fundamental that we have more spaces like this to build our strategic alliances. So thank you so much for this space. It's a great pleasure.
Been marvelous to have you play a part in it. Thank you so much, Tyler. We can zoom back to the United Kingdom, I think, because we have two people here. I've yet to see their faces pop up, but I presume we have to hand. Vicky Hurd. Do we have Vicky Hurd? We do. Thank you, Vicky. That's reassuring. And also following up from you, Chris Packham. Vicky, I'll start with you first. We live streamed for part of the online conference, the session you did with Dave Goulson on the insect apocalypse and perhaps averting it, one hopes. You, of course, have played an enormously important role in adding to the wisdom out there and raising awareness and making sure the science and research is front and center and the organizations are functioning well, for which we all owe you a debt of gratitude. And your work is not over. Do you sense, it's just begun, do you sense something different now as we come out the other side of the extraordinary COVID years, which in some respects were quite oddly good for the environment in ways that perhaps some people didn't appreciate fully enough? What do you sense is different now?
Yes, I think, I mean, I've got to say that Morgan's line about the, it's a conference about the future of humanity is spot on, because we're part of this home, this one planet, and it's absolutely true, and really encouraging to see so many people here. It's so diverse. There's more women speaking than ever, and the youth that were here and online, absolutely fantastic. So I'm actually quite positive. So in a way, to answer your question, I think it is positive. One of the reasons I wrote my book, which is called Rebugging the Planet, was because I think a lot more people care about the invertebrates, which is what our session was about, particularly about the insects, which Dave Goulson, Professor Goulson, has done amazing work looking at the importance of them, which, you know, we know the invertebrates are absolutely critical to our food systems, but also to our lives. Everything in our life requires invertebrates to be involved in some way. Most people don't know. So trying to raise awareness of that is absolutely critical. And Chris, and the Spring Watch series, which and any sort of global series which is raising awareness of the role of nature in our lives is making a difference. That's you know, ability to spread the word, spread evidence, to spread science, to excite people about nature is critical, but also exciting them about the role of nature in delivering us good food alongside the people that we need to be protecting, and we need the justice in the food system, as the previous speaker said, but we need justice for nature and for the natural systems on which we absolutely depend. So we were talking with the professor about that work that he's been doing, and one of the big things he did was highlight he did research on a particularly harmful insecticide called neonicotinoids, and I asked him about the abuse he's got, because he's a scientist, he's independent, rigorous, robust in his work, but he gets abuse a lot because he's an activist scientist. He's prepared to speak out, and so I wanted to give him our love on the stage at ORFC and tell him that the people in the room and in the listening were very grateful to him and other activist scientists for the work they do, because they put their head above the parapet and they get a lot of abuse, and he described some of that. Really shocking, but important that he is supported by us and that we spread the word. And obviously the urgency is very strong all the way through all the sessions I've been to online and in person in ORFC, which have been fantastic. I'm going to watch a lot more afterwards. I hope everybody else does, because we wouldn't have been able to see maybe a fifth or less of all the sessions. So I think that urgency was very strong. In terms of insects, we're losing them. There's a real urgency in changing the way we farm in order to protect them. The way we do things like feeding animals, huge amount of soya from rainforest, there's on and on. There's so many ways in which our food system is hurting the invertebrates. But the other side of it, which I think is just to finish off, really strong emphasis in this Oxford Real Farming Conference around the post-farm gate role, the supply chains, the traders, and what can be done differently so farmers can actually farm in agroecological ways. And at the moment, we're nowhere near there. But ORFC has really pioneered the looking at this. I remember 5 years ago, there were sessions on agroecological supply chains. Brilliant. That kind of reinforced in me the need to do more on that. And we're doing a lot of work at Sustain on supply chains, because at the moment, farmers get so little money. It's really hard for them to do the transition. It's a big risk. And so we want new and better alternative supply chain, better traders, so that farmers can get more of the value of what they do, recognized for what they do, and a responsive customer base. Absolutely critical.
Without an educated customer base, it becomes a roller coaster ride. I mean, I chaired a session on the economic challenges facing farm production and farm businesses. And during COVID, they were flavor of the month. Farm gate sales went up, farm shop sales went through the roof, but the loyalty didn't remain. It has, because the economic crunch has cut in, and the message, we're so, a population as a whole is so seduced, as it were, by the supermarkets preserving this illusion of constant availability, that they don't understand that you can't pick up with a farm shop and then just walk away and expect it to be there next time there's a crisis.
Absolutely. But what I want to see is those kind of alternative food systems go out of their niche. And I learned today that niche actually comes from the word nest. So it's actually a nice word. You're in your nest, but we don't want it to stay one nest. We want many nests and niches across the country, so more people can access that food, but also you're cutting out the intermediaries, which take loads of cost out of the chain. So farmers can get well paid to do what they need to do, and customers don't have to pay loads more, because one of the, as you say, problem with the cost of living crisis is that they can't necessarily afford the potentially higher prices or the time involved in going to different farming food supply systems like box schemes or farmers markets. And that's got to change. And that's really exciting conversations over the last 3 days about how we can change, how we can replicate the kind of brilliant schemes that you were talking about there. But as you say, we need a lot more recognition of that, the need for that, and why it's so important for nature that you actually go to your farmer's market, or you do differently. Don't buy the junk food in the supermarket, the overpackaged junk food. So more education, but it's got to be more available as well. So we need to bridge the gap between what agroecological farmers need and what consumers need. And I think alternative supply chains are a very big part of that. And it's great to hear them talked about so much here.
And the pressure kept up.
Yeah, absolutely. So much to do, but it's been wonderful.
Chris Packham, stay with us, Vicky. Chris Packham, so well known in the United Kingdom, perhaps now increasingly well known internationally. Lucky all of them as well. Wildlife campaigner and educator, and of course, the pressure point between farming and wildlife. It's not ever been an easy relationship when it should never have been a bad one. Are you seeing a change? Are you optimistic, or do you still feel mostly infuriation and despair?
I'm seeing hope, and that hope is manifest by the Real Farming Conference. And I'd like to start by saying thank you. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for existing. Thank you for germinating from a position of protest in a way, but now in a position of leading progression and positive movement in the farming fraternity, not just in the UK, but around the world. So knowing what your delegates have been discussing, listening to some of that, reading the reports, following it on social media is heartening for an environmentalist and conservationist such as myself, I have to say, because we still face tremendous problems in farming. I'm going to touch on a couple of those. But firstly, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to address you for what in the UK is this afternoon. I saw that it had been publicised back in November. The Scottish farmer, Ken Fletcher, the editor, had reported that farming's arch enemy, Chris Packham, myself, now, if I've stolen the crown from George Monbiot, then he might be a little cross, but farming's arch enemy is going to be part of the Oxford Real Farming Conference. What he goes on to report, obviously putting that hyperbole behind him, is that what I said was, and this is very important, conservationists like myself are keen to work with agro-ecological farmers and support them at a time when their future is under threat. What they've already proved is that the methodology works. They're producing top quality food with good standards of animal welfare. They look after the environment and they ensure, critically, a rural economy that can last into the future. We need a new future for farming because we need to reshape the way that we impact our landscape. Agroecological farmers are the pioneers. That's the way I see it. And this should be a time when we pay them properly for looking after the environment and producing top quality food. So if that makes me farming's arch enemy, then I'm happy to accept the crown because I don't see myself as that. I am, of course, like so many other environmentalists and conservationists, an enemy, whether I'm the arch enemy, of industrial farming. And for those who don't recognize the need to change our minds and our practices. Now, in the UK, 85% of our land that feeds the UK, the productive land in the UK, 85% of that is given over to animal agriculture. And a report published here last year, Dimbleby's report, said that we needed a 30% reduction in animal agriculture to meet the needs of addressing climate change because of the emissions that arise as a result of that. And yet what I read in a national newspaper, the Guardian national newspaper in the UK this week, is that it's been leaked that the government's land use strategy will see no reduction in area given to animal agriculture. As a consequence of that, Lord Debon, a farmer himself, has spoken out and said that the livestock sector is not helping itself by denying greenhouse gas emissions. And there is a problem here. There is a very significant problem. And that in some ways becomes divisive because of course I see that as something which needs to be addressed. I hope that doesn't make me an arch enemy of farming. It may make me controversial, and I'm happy with that tag. If you look at the dictionary definition of controversial, it means to promote conversation. And isn't that what the Real Farming Conference has always been about? Promoting conversation about new ideas, sometimes ideas that have been seen as radical, but are becoming more mainstream. And it's through that conversation, creative, peaceful, polite and democratic, that we see the progress that we want to make. It's interesting that one of your delegates, I presume, who I follow on social media, a man called Christopher Price, I think he's Chris Rare Breeds on Twitter, has said in response to what Lord Debon said, we want less but better. We want less animal agriculture, but we want better quality animal agriculture. There is no question of that. I'm also campaigning at the moment on behalf of chickens. Over 1 billion chickens are farmed and slaughtered in the UK every year. Most of them are what we call Franken chickens, a type of chicken which has been bred to reach maturity in just 6 weeks. They live in sheds of 10,000. There is seriously threats of pollution from the runoff from their feces. In many parts of the UK, we're seeing our river systems severely damaged by this. They're feeding on soya that's being imported from Brazil, from areas where rainforest has been felled. Am I the arch enemy of that type of industrial farming? Then yes, I am, because I want to see it reformed. And it's not just me. 78% of the UK population in a recent poll have said that they will be prepared to pay more for better standards of animal welfare. And 300 people have signed our petition to introduce the Better Chicken Commitment. Some significant major supermarkets in the UK have signed up and already meeting that commitment, which is fantastic. And we're in the process of phasing out nearly 30% of those Franken chickens here in the UK. So in terms of animal welfare, that to me is significant progress. And we know, of course, that industrial farming on this level represents real threats globally, because the bird flu, which is sweeping across the world at the moment, devastating our wild bird populations, threatening our domestic bird agriculture and all of those involved in it, their lives and livelihood, arose from industrial farms of that magnitude in the Far East. So industrial farming is a very real threat to our environment and to our ecosystems. There is no question of that. I don't know whether you've given much, I've listened to you talking about equality in terms of your farmers, but what about your consumers? Because here, one of the things that I've come up against in my campaign to improve welfare standards for chickens is that the supermarkets, who have a stranglehold over food sales in the UK, will say, but we can't sell those higher value birds, higher welfare standard birds at a price point that can satisfy our customers. And that lack of equality really concerns me, because I don't like the idea that only the well-off can afford to make decisions about the quality of animal husbandry or the way that that husbandry impacts on the environment. That is something that we must address. It must be a fair choice for every one of us as consumers to be able to have a positive impact on the environment. And that brings us to another point, and this may not be an issue in other parts of the world, but I think we can see it as a considerable one here, and that is food labeling. Now, I'm a vegan, I don't eat meat. A lot of people are cutting down on their meat, and they wish to choose higher welfare meat, which has a lesser environmental impact. And this will help that transition to all of those farmers who are livestock farmers at the moment, who will be moving into a world where less meat is produced. The report that I've already mentioned, Dimbleby's report, said that in the UK, the only way to meet the targets was a 30% reduction. Our mission as environmentalists and conservationists has to be to help those farmers through that transition, to speak of tolerance and use kindness as our methodology in order to make that work. But we do need it to work. And that means that we need to pass on choices to the consumers. But food labeling in the UK is so poor that it's very difficult to make those choices in supermarket aisles. And again, going back to 2018, our government minister, Michael Gove at the time, said that consumers needed to have better information so they could make the right choices for health and the environment. If you look at our labeling here, it's terrible. It says things, subjective things like high and low or reduced when it comes to salts and fibers. What does that actually mean? Let alone about the provenance of those products and where they've come from. The meat industry, through the British Meat Processors Association, lashed back at Mr. Gove and said that providing more information to consumers would be confusing to them. I disagree entirely. I think as a consumer, I want the ability to make ethical, moral, economic choices when I'm shopping for my food. And I want to be able to balance those choices so that it's fair. And I am in a place where I can take an opportunity when it arises to reduce the amount of environmental damage that my diet impacts upon not just the UK, of course, but on the world. So I'd like to see far better food labeling. And I wonder if we posted pictures of those Franken chickens in those giant, horrible sheds on the labels of that food, Would people buy it? Or would they, like the 78% have said, reduce the amount of that meat that they would actually buy? So that's something that I see as really important. There are other impacts which we need to address, and particularly here in the UK, one that attracts a lot of attention, a lot of controversy. My colleague, George Monbiot, in the past has received an enormous amount of, as Vicky has just been saying, antagonism, hate, online hate from farmers for questioning our sheep industry. And yet the National Farmers Union, the lobbyism body that we have here in the UK, sponsored a Duchy College report. Duchy College is a farming business college in the UK in 2018. And they found that in all the major sheep rearing areas, per ewe cost lost 50 to 100 pounds per head. So that part of the sheep industry in the UK was running entirely on subsidies. That's taxpayers' money. Now that will not persist. That has to change. So we have to change the way that we farm sheep. We need to invest with ideas, diversification into those potentially profitable parts of the sheep farming industry. And if they can't be profitable, then we need to, again, help those sheep farmers through a transition to using that landscape in a different way. And there are many ways that that's been tried, and we've seen it profitable for many of those farmers. But this is difficult because as intelligent, resourceful, and as adaptable we as humans, those sheep farmers are, we do struggle to change our minds. And particularly if we're being told to, not asked to. So I see this again as a process where consumers, environmentalists, conservationists, and farmers need to work very closely together, hand in hand, peacefully, without division, without the nonsense of being called farming's arch enemy. This achieves nothing. All it does is prolong the process of progress that we're so keen to make. And I think
Chris,
there's one last thing. It's really important I make this last point.
I'm so sorry to interject. I should warn you.
Yeah.
A gentleman who is apparently part of security here has told me they're locking up and I need to move, but
okay.
I have nowhere to move to, and I have two people from South America to talk to as well.
Can I just make one point?
This is, yeah, quickly, really if you would do this.
Lastly, it's mental health. And I have to speak about this because if it hasn't been covered in your conference, I sincerely hope it will be at some point in the future. Mind Your Head was a survey that was conducted. 88% of under 40 farmers in the UK rank poor mental health as the biggest hidden problem they face. 2019-20, 20 fatalities, unfortunate fatalities on farms in the UK, 133 suicides. If farmers are feeling the effects of mental health out there, and young farmers have already identified that talking removes that stigma, can I please say with my parting shot, please go to yellowwellies.org, and follow them on their social media, which is Yellow Wellies UK. This is incredibly important. Farmers are under tremendous stress, and we must do everything we can to reduce that. Thank you.
That was recognized here. Thank you, Chris, so much. Vicky, my intention to return to you has been nixed by a man with a set of keys. Now I'm going to do something, I'm going to experiment with something here because we're obviously online. This is a flexible medium. I can pack up so that I don't get arrested and taken out of Oxford courtroom in handcuffs. I can pack up while still talking to you all because this is what online gives us the ability to do. So can I move now to South America? Do we have our participants from Ecuador and Brazil online? Are they still there?
Yes.
They are. Welcome. Welcome. Now let me see. I should have Javier Carrera.
Yeah, that's me.
And I should have Karen Necasa.
I'm gonna have to go because I've got to get a lift.
Okay, Vicky, you go. We understand. So I have Javier Carrera from Ecuador. Welcome, welcome. We are closing the online conference of the Oxford Real Farming Conference 2023. We have all been sharing what the conference meant to us this year, what the most important takeaways from it were. I'm going to have to be quite nimble here because they're trying to close down the venue around me. It's definitely a wrap. So while I pack up, I can still keep talking to you because I'm online. So tell me, how was the conference for you? What did you get from it? It's extraordinary to be talking to someone from Ecuador about a conference
Thank
about matters
you.
that we all care so deeply about. I'm a farmer in England. I don't know if you had a chance to connect with our own stories over here.
Thank you. Well, all these kinds of events are very important, I think, because they can help us connect and share experiences that may be following the same subjects, but can be substantially different. In our case, we hosted a small conference about the participatory guarantee systems. And our first idea was simply to share the system we created from scratch, from the bottom up, which is very small because we are actually a small country. And the struggle we are having today with the state who wants to control these systems and who obviously, well, the technicians there don't understand at all what we are trying to create. Yeah. So it was reaching out, but we were recommended to share the space with people from other continents and kind of compare these different systems. And it was incredible to see the level of development that these systems have in India, for example, which is amazing. But still, we were left with a kind of pride for the little work we're doing for the innovation, you know. So I think that communication is key, and we need to learn from others people's experiences. And to see what we can adapt from other places to our situations. So my impression of the whole conference has been that. I really feel that there's still more need to share experiences from the global south. And yeah, because we have access to a lot of information coming from the north, from Europe, from the States, etc. And it's easy to get that information, but also it's just one part, you know. And the rest of the world is developing agroecology in substantial ways, and those voices are not heard. So this conference has been a huge step towards that, and I'm very happy for that. It's the second time I participate, and there's definitely a difference. But I think we must continue walking this path. Maybe it will not be, I mean, it's only the name, the Oxford Conference, because it usually takes place there. But it should be walking towards a global conference on agroecology and trying to give space to the other places on the planet whose voices are not normally heard. That would be kind of like my hope or recommendation. You have done a terrific job. I thank you very much. But this is the little worm eating my apple right now. We must continue. We must strengthen these things. And let me tell you something that came out in our space when we were discussing this. Somebody asked, but these participatory guarantee systems will not be accepted in the international market, and we answered yes. In the global conventional market, our systems will not be accepted, even if actually they are. I would say better, more in depth than the normal certification system. But there are ways to do that, to reach outside markets. And what we have been doing is getting in contact with two foreign organizations of farmers and consumers, and they are willing to believe in our system and import to their countries our produce. So following that idea, I think it's important that we begin to make direct connections between different associations of producers, I don't know, networks like our network in Ecuador, for the cases where exporting food is important. But still, food sovereignty is our main goal, and that means local markets. And yeah, we must also be aware of that. So that is all. Thank you very much again, and I hope we'll see each other next year. Bye.
I'm sure we will, and it's been absolutely glorious welcoming you into this online community, which we hope will just grow and strengthen. You have been incredibly patient, Karen, for which I am hugely grateful. You are our last delegate. You are, I hope I'm right, you are in Brazil.
Sorry?
You're not in Brazil.
No, I'm in Kenya.
You're in Kenya.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, you know, hooray, that's fantastic. We've stretched right across the world.
Yes.
I do apologize. My notes here were not as comprehensive as I would have liked. Kenya, how do you know how big the conference, the reach of the conference was in Kenya? How many people were able to attend? And what particular issues relevant to Kenya or tangentially relevant to Kenya, overlapping with Kenyan issues, did you find from this conference?
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Anita. And it's a pleasure to speak the last. This is because so much has been said. Maybe I'll just give an experience from Kenya, from your question, but also
Please.
just to thank the organizers, Oxford Farming, and the funders, of course, for this hybrid session. For me, it has been a very, very good one, especially in terms of collaboration and networking. A colleague just talked about Twitter. I've been following that, and this has been great. Thank you so much. So the Kenyan, I would say that we are members of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, and I co-chair the Climate Change Working Group. And now we are saying it's no longer climate change, it's a crisis. And we can all see from this conference, we've had people talk about so many things coming up, diseases, drought, erratic rainfall, and all that is really affecting even our local seed. Our indigenous knowledge is no longer now being considered. And this conference has brought up issues that can really take us back to our roots. I was actually glad to have an opportunity to also listen to the gentleman from, I think, India, who was bringing in the sacredness of these issues and respect for land, water, air, and actually the earth as a whole is very important because we are all interconnected. So from the conference, I was so glad to also participate in a youth organized event by AFSA, but of course with the Oxford Farming. But also what came out clearly from there was the issue of having intergenerational learning. And it came out clear that we have, some of us were doing great work. And for sure, this is a movement. Agroecology is a movement. It begins from the young children to those in the universities. So we could see and hear people talk about establishing of role model farms, which are agroecological. And this is a very, very important for all of us to learn from, especially in Africa and across the continent. So that was a very, very big thing for us to learn from. But also the other one is the issue of having children learn that food is not only gotten from the supermarket. The garden is a supermarket. We have herbs, all sorts of fruits, all vegetables. So they learn from there, and this really also helps them in schools. So that is really, really excellent from this conference. You asked me about if I know how many people participated from Kenya. I would say I think a number of them, because we also have Pelham Association here, and they were present in this conversation, but also work with partners across the country. So I'm sure quite a number of them participated, and some of them were able to be speakers and speak on issues that are related to agroecology. So for me, I think it is very important that this brought out the issue of championing small African farming systems based on agroecological and indigenous approaches. That is why we talk about use of locally available resources, and this begins from your home to the national policies. And that is why we bring in as agroecological movement, we say that we really want to see government policies that are talking about agroecology, that are bringing about agroecological farming as a way of life, not just farming in the normal way, but a way of life. So we are working towards ensuring that governments have done that. And this has come out from some of the stories we've had from the conferences. We've had people conduct research, and they have so much knowledge and best practices from the agroecological movement and activities they're doing in their different countries. What was exciting for me again today was I was able to moderate or chair the session on COP27 and agroecology. So we had speakers talking to it, and at least we can confirm to this conference that there are at least opportunities for us to include agroecology in the next future topics. Probably COP28 can be a way to all of us unite and work together to include agroecology as a future topic. As a member of AFSA, we are doing that, and through other partners are present on this online session right now. I'm sure we can really combine efforts and make sure we do all this. But what is also important for me is the issue of women, but not only women, of course, gender, bringing all the pastoralists, fisher folks, indigenous people at the forefront. Sometimes when we're doing our work, we choose not to include all of them, and that really affects our policy space. If we do not include all of them, then there will be a gap in the policy space. Then the policies will not be harmonized at all. Then we'll start bringing in about issues of harmonizing policies, which again takes a long time. And then we really don't achieve our objective as a movement. So let's really try to bring in all the other stakeholders involved in this movement so that we are able to move forward and not backwards. And we say, let's not leave anyone behind. So for me, I would also want to say that since I work with an organization that really works with schools, regional schools and colleges permaculture program, I would want to say in this conference that every school should have at least a garden, every university should be associated with a farm, and young people and everyone in this universe should recognize the value of growing and eating your own food. And we have a campaign called My Food is African, because these are all nutritious foods. We talk about issue of nutrition, food wastage, but we see if we do the best, these things will no longer be there. When we were following COP27 last year, the issues we were following was on finance, adaptation. We're also looking at gender issues, but also following the Coronivia work on joint agriculture. All those issues interconnect. So it's very important that we all understand and really work towards that. In conclusion, Anita, I saw you already packed. Yeah, I'll try to be fast. Just to conclude, biodiversity loss, land degradation, water crisis, of course, green gas emissions, hunger, malnutrition, diet, related chronic diseases, and poverty requires national and global political will, and of course, economical transformation. So by holding each one of us accountable, we are able to take care of our earth. So there's no planet B. Let's be responsible. Let's be accountable. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you next year. I'm happy that this is my second time joining the Oxford Real Farming Conference. Thank you so much. And thanks so much also to our speakers who have just spoken before me. Thank you.
Kananakasa, you are so welcome. We expect you to return for the 2024 conference. And what is so remarkable for me, having attended the 2 days here in Oxford, is the universality of the messages coming from the 4 corners of the world. This is absolutely the only issue, the climate and how we get through this challenge to the climate and how we nurture the planet to enable us, if it's at all possible now, having left it so late, to survive. These are the questions, the only questions. Education of our young people, awareness in the wider community. These are the issues, they're common issues, and we hear this now from across the world. So thank you so much. And this wraps the ORFC online conference for 2023, Voices in Translation from the 4 corners of the world, brought to you on the subject essentially of saving this beautiful planet and feeding us well while we do it, if it's at all possible. And we will see you all of you, most warmly and most welcome in 2024. Thank you so much for being a part of this event.